What's up? It's your boy ET. Look, if you're looking to or you got to raise the bar on your marriage, you gotta click the link and get into Married into Crazy, y'all. I'm telling you, this coaching is gonna take your relationship to another level. Now look, you already know you need to raise the bar. You know that already. So stop thinking or overthinking. Click that link, and Marriage into Crazy is gonna take you and your spouse to marital bliss. Now you know. Click the button. Let's go.
Welcome to another episode of Married into Crazy with Snooks and Lovey. I'm Lovey.
I'm Snooks.
And it's Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
So, happy Valentine's Day. Oh, by the way, happy Valentine's Day, Snooks.
I literally just said it first, so.
I thought you said it to them, not me.
Oh, it was all encompassing.
Well, I didn't know because I didn't get a Valentine's Day card. So I'm just saying.
You don't even read the cards.
I read them.
Okay.
No,
so here's the deal with Lovey. Lovey will, he may read them, and then I'll find it somewhere. Like, what? Okay. At least with my cards that I get, I put them up and they sit there for a minute. The envelope may be on top of it. I'm like, wow, seriously?
No, I read them and I have them out for a little while, but then I eventually toss them.
You don't have them out. And here's the thing that with cards, though, have you noticed that cards are like gifts? They're like $6 for a very nice card. So I'm like, do they want the money or do they want the card? Do they want the gift? So
it's crazy. So before it used to be like, ooh, they made a card. That's cheap. They're being cheap. Now it's like, ooh, they're being creative.
Yeah.
It's completely shifted.
Seriously. I actually like that a little bit better. Only because for me, there are cards that they look nice, aesthetically. I'm like, oh, I love the way it looks or what have you. But it'll say some good stuff, and then there'll be like one little paragraph that doesn't apply to anything. And I'm very personal with when I get the cards. I wanted everything on that card to be exactly how I feel. So I end up sometimes I used to get like 2 cards and okay, here's one and here's another one. But I prefer if you were to handwrite me a card because that means you put effort into it and you thought about what it is that you wanted to say. And I know that it came from the heart.
Right. I know exactly what you mean because there's times I'm sitting here, I'm like, ooh, I like this card. Like you said, I like the aesthetics. I like the way it feels, the look. I'm like, oh, this is so us. And then I read about 3/4 of the way and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay, that's
does
not
not
us.
apply.
No, that's not
Exactly.
Nope. I'm thinking, can I cross that off? Would it look really bad if I just kind of like do a
Does
light
not
and
apply.
strike through, scribble
Yeah.
it out, write my own stuff? It's so funny. I have a friend, and what she and her husband did, they don't really do Valentine's Day either, and they've been married for a while. They were at the store. She just told me this the other day. They're at the store, and so she challenged her. She's like, "Hey, quick, meet me over here." So they go to the card aisle, and they went over there, and she said, "Pick me out a card, and I'll pick you one out here, and we'll read them out loud here in the store."
And put them back.
And put them back. They did.
That's funny.
That's exactly what they did. I told her I was going to try and do that, but we didn't get a chance to just because we hadn't made it to the store.
That's hecka funny.
But that's real life, real story. And if you're listening,
that's
PD
funny.
Ware, I told you I was going to use that. So that was that's real life.
That's hecka funny.
These are the things we do, folks. We've been married for almost 26 years.
Like almost.
We've been married for 26 plus years, and these are the things we talk about, we come up to. And if you've been listening for a while, I'm not a huge proponent for Valentine's Day because I believe in love 365, that we should be trying to really show each other that we love each other, not just, have this big hurrah on one day. Now, don't get me wrong. We are going to be going out to dinner tomorrow, not tonight, because for Valentine's Day, I've got volleyball practice.
The things I sacrifice for
years, for over a decade. Snooks has sacrificed birthdays, Mother's Day, Valentine's Days,
anniversaries,
holidays for volleyball. The
And
life of a
I thought that
coach's wife.
we were done. I was excited, and then he's like, "One more year."
And then after that, I was like, one more year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm cool with it, especially, um, I know it's like it's super hard to get into a restaurant or whatever on Valentine's Day. One thing that we used to do, and this is so funny because the girls actually kind of called us out on this. We would do our own Valentine's celebration at home, and they got flowers and they got a gift, and we would have dinner, and it was like a big thing, and they dressed up and stuff. And we did that because I wanted them to experience that, so that not some little knucklehead come and try to wine and dine them real quick, and then they get all fall all head over heels, and so they be like, "Oh, we used to do this all the time. You got to step up your game, bruh."
Right.
But last year, and this was like in November or something. I don't know how Valentine's Day came up. They're like, "You know what? We haven't gotten a Valentine's Day gift in a while." And I was like, "Well, Valentine's is in February." And I don't even think we did anything in February. And I was like, "No, you are absolutely right. We did not." But remember too, last year I
Just
had
coming
just
to the
come
hospital.
home. I mean, it was a month later, but still, we were still kind of taking it easy, not doing anything. Kiana was like, "So y'all didn't pass no stores?" I was like, "And that's why you didn't get a gift." So be quiet.
Spoiled, spoiled. And okay, you know what? That's a great segue because today we're going to be talking about nature versus nurture. And when we're talking about not just Valentine's Day, but just talking about how we, I don't say perform in relationships, but how we exist within our relationships.
Mm.
It came up the other day with an individual talking about nature versus nurture, and really started getting our wheels turning as to how that shows up in our relationships. And so you're talking about what we're trying to do is create a nurture, right? Create an environment where the girls had a norm of, no, this is what it's supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to be treated. It's not, it's the norm. I am a princess. I am a queen. I am good enough. I am enough. And excuse me. And so that when somebody comes and tries to show out, they're like, that ain't nothing new, bro.
Right.
Bring your A game. So that's a nurture aspect of it,
A
right?
plus game. Mm-hmm.
Right. Whereas nature would be, something that they create. Like, okay, it's in me. I'm such a loving individual that I want to do these things. It just comes naturally.
Mm.
So some people believe that they're not built for relationships, or at least that they have a hard time dealing with the relationships. And they're wondering, is it because of the environment I grew up in? Or is it just because that's just not me, or that I'm just not built for that?
Mm. I I think that there are some people who use either one as an excuse not to do better.
Mm,
You know, so well, that's just how I am, or that's just how I was raised, or that's what I saw, or I mean, just kind of those kind of things. And it's like, so are you using that as an excuse not to try to do better? You know,
right.
I feel like kind of like we were kind of talking with this individual about, they were like, "Well, this is the way that I grew up, was X, Y, and Z." But it's like, okay, so are you doing this because that's how you grew up, or is that how you really feel? So is it, you know because what everyone around you expects you to be like, or you know are these your true values? you
Right.
know we sometimes we're there's a conflict in our values, because I put on this air that, oh, I'm this way, but innately I'm really different, but I'm only doing that to please the masses, what they see. Does
Is,
that make
is, is
sense?
it to please the masses, or is it sometimes to, ensure your own survival because you have to act a certain way in order to survive, or at least to be accepted in certain
It's
environments?
still to please the other people, though. I feel like if I have to, this is just me. I feel like if I'm putting on an air, um, and I feel like it's survival mode. I'm only surviving because that's not how they see it, how the other people think it should be. So I'm actually pleasing them while surviving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
So when we're talking about nature versus nurture, see, both play a role in shaping our personalities, our behaviors, and relationships. Now, what we'd like to do is, or what I'd like to do is go over 5 different, I guess, areas or 5 ways in which nature versus nurture can affect relationships.
Mhm.
And one of you kind of alluded to was temperament.
Okay. No, this just kind of got my wheels turning a little
Oh, go
bit.
for it. Go for it.
Just thinking about nature versus nurture. So for myself, I've always been a romantic. That was innately in me. I remember as a young child, I loved love songs, and I didn't even know why I liked certain songs. There was these slow songs, and they talked about love and feelings and those kind of things. I've always loved that. I've always loved happy endings and
I
things like
like happy
that.
endings.
Those kind, stop. But you know what I'm saying, like, fairy tale or whatever. So that was for me, that's nature, biology. That's just innately something that's in me. Not necessarily something that I saw, because that wasn't how I was really raised.
How you were conditioned.
How I was I mean, yeah, we talked about it before. I was raised by my mom was single, and her main thing was like, you take care of you. You don't have to worry about nobody else, all those things. And even some of the people that in my family that were married, I didn't see all the, oh hey baby, blah blah blah, and not that they didn't hold hands, but I didn't see that level of love come from them or to their spouses or whatever. They say hey, hi, walk by, and if there was a kiss, it was a bland one. You could feel the love. You can really feel it, or you cannot feel it.
Or the lack thereof, right?
So for myself, I'm just talking about me right now. it it's always been a nature versus nurture. I think nature shaped me more than nurture did, because I wasn't nurtured to be a wife or see that loving type of whatever. So myself, you know, I would always go with nature, just because of how I know how I was totally different from everybody in my family. They was like, oh girl, that's fairy tale. That's just TV. That's not real. That's you don't, that stuff ain't gonna happen. And I was like, I bet you it will for me, because that was just how I was.
Well, think of the opposite. So what you're talking about is your temperament, right? That's just how you are naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So your temperament was gauged at an early age. Just like you said, it was very innate for you to be that loving, caring individual that just gravitated towards the love stories. But if you have somebody whose temperament was a little bit more anxious, right, and they had more of a sensitive temperament, they may have been more likely to feel overwhelmed or anxious in certain situations, which could affect their ability to communicate effectively with their partner. So if somebody grew up and they were just naturally like just nervous and just that, it's just I don't know, had a very anxious air about them, whereas your natural, it was just a loving, caring, lovey-dovey type thing. It's one of those things where it could play a part. And when people are asking themselves, wow, why can't I have a sustaining relationship? Or you sometimes need to dig beyond just the moment, like right now. It's not just about now. It's about all these things that actually feed into that's been put into the recipe. This gumbo that we are, and we are. That's really what we are. We're a gumbo because there's all these different ingredients that go into it. Except we think that you put all the ingredients in at one time and cook it up. No, the ingredients when it comes to our love gumbo has been actually put into us from the time of birth.
Mm.
These ingredients have actually been, simmering, so to speak, over time. And, adding a little bit here, adding a little bit there, removing some of this, removing some of that. So there's a process by which these things come into play. And temperament, what you're talking about, is nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a strong argument for nature.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So now there's another element that comes into play, which is like attachment styles. Now, attachment styles are largely shaped by our early experiences with caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
The people, and when I say caregivers, I'm not just talking about babysitters, nannies, um, daycare. Caregivers meaning parents, siblings, aunts, everybody that ever cared for you and that had an opportunity to pour into you. Now, that's a product more of nurture.
Nurture. Mm-hmm.
People with secure attachment styles, they tend to have more successful relationships because early on it was very fulfilling and
I was
loving.
about to say, yeah, they were their needs were met
Mhm.
in that area. You know, it was they were cared for, and not that other people are not cared for, but it was a specific type of way that they were cared for. Their caregivers, you know, made sure that they felt the love. That's, you know, the way that I could describe it. So excuse me. They don't grow up as detached as someone who, you know, maybe their parents didn't make the time, or not trying to throw shade or anything, because some parents, shoot, I gotta work, you know.
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid.
So was I.
Came home. I mean, literally, I was that poster child. Like, I actually had a necklace, a chain with
So
a
did
key
we.
on it that I wore all day long,
Right.
and that was my house key.
You know what's crazy? I remember walking home from kindergarten. We went to the school we went to, Newton Booth. It was like far from where we lived. And me, my brother, and my cousin, we walked home. You know, it's the three of us, but shoot, Todd was 2 years older than us. Initially, we didn't, you know, walk home right away, but I remember first kindergarten, in the kindergarten, first grade, we were walking home from school. So it wasn't no.
Right. And I was walking home from kindergarten, but I remember like in first, it was first through fourth. It was somewhere around the second or third grade where we're walking back from St. Pat's, which is where I went, and I lived over on 42nd over in Oak Park. And we were we were walking home, and over by like the 7-Eleven, right across the street from Campbell Soup, some truck
Campbell
pulled
soup.
in
Hmm.
and tried to grab one of the kids that was in our group.
What?
And yeah, and Nanette, who lived on the corner. Nanette was the oldest one in the group. And I look back, and Annette was so much bigger than us, but she was probably only like in fourth or fifth grade when we were like in second, first and second grade. And she told her about run, and we all ran, and everybody got away. But you just made me think about that right now. But it was just one of those things where we were walking home,
Wow.
and this has absolutely nothing to do with nature versus nurture. We're just going down memory
Just
lane.
a memory.
Um, but
That's funny.
but even so, but even though there was the attachment style for my family was very not purposefully, but detached. My mom worked her butt off. I mean, she worked her butt off, bent over backwards to put me through private education, private school. So, like I said, I was a latchkey kid. I'd come home and, I'd have that kid. But bottom line was, if I wasn't at home, I was at practice of some sort for athletics, at sports. I was either on the football field, the basketball court, or the track, or I was home doing homework.
Mm,
That was it. No time to run the streets.
yeah.
I'd run the street between school and
Right.
home, and that was about as far as I got. And then it's funny, my family was attached to the things I did,
Mm,
but weren't necessarily attached to me as an individual.
I get that. It's funny too, because just even thinking about like your mom and so many other moms and dads who they gave their all for their kids to have a better life. But some of that giving of themselves, working that extra time, and there was such a excuse me, there's such a big part of them was lost. You know, they lost a lot of intimacy with their children because they weren't there. That's one thing that we talk about, you know, with even with couples. How present are you? Don't do all this stuff to I want to give you the world. I want you to have this big glamorous house and this fancy car, and you know, buying these Birkin bags or whatever they are. You know, those very expensive bags and stuff. So you're working, always thinking about the things that you can give the person, but you're not there. You know, the very person that I said I do to, or I'm in this relationship with, um, all I want is you. Now, all
Right.
that other stuff is great, but I I'm not finna lay down in the bed with my bag. My bag
Some
is gonna
people
be
do.
cold. Well, that's true. But that just made me think about, the sacrifices or the trade-offs. Are they always worth it? You know? We have to
Well,
that's one thing that we have to really think about. And like we try to keep it away from sacrifice and even keeping it more positive. Is the trade-off worth it? Because I have all these things now, but you could end up being a stranger to me in my own home.
true, because you've placed so much emphasis on these things, and if you've grown up with, and there was an attachment style that just the nurture of if there was any disconnect whatsoever, and you're having difficulty with trust and intimacy now as an adult, it could be traced back to those types of things,
Hmm.
and it's very real because is one better than the other? Nurture versus nature? I don't think one is better than the other, but I do think that we have to look at, is it serving you?
Hmm. Hmm.
Is your, and we can't be so resolute, because look, it's been proven that our cells, replenish every single day. You cast off old cells. There used to be a thought where your brain cells could never actually, what you have is what you have, and once your brain cells die off, that's it. Well, there's a thing called neuroplasticity now, where we now have learned that nope, that's not the case. We can actually generate new brain cells, and we can relearn things. You can teach an old dog new tricks, but the willingness has to be there,
Hmm.
and you have to want it. And like you mentioned, sacrifice versus trade-off. We want to talk about, or share with you that people should look at things as a trade-off, not as a sacrifice. So when you're talking about what I have to give up, it's not what you have to give up, it's what you have to trade. Think of it as an exchange. Like, I'm going to give this away in order to acquire this. So I'm going to give up some of the nurture that's been embedded within me. I'm going to fight desperately to remove some of these things, unlearn them. Like you always talk about, Snook, sometimes we have to unlearn some things. I'm going to unlearn some of these things so I can now accept and make room for something new. So I can be a better lover. So I can be a better, um, confidant. So I can be a better father. So I can be a better husband. So I can be a better spouse.
Hmm.
That's nurture. And so that it's all about really getting down to, what kind of person do you really want to be when it comes to a relationship. So those are the first two things, and we've been going deep. um, Listen, before we continue, you have to excuse us because we're both coming off a cold. I'm further away from it now. Snooks is just now getting on the other side of it, because we have little ones now that bring, the goobly gooks, the sickness into the home. But I think this is an apropos time for us to remind you to make sure you go over to marriedandcrazy.com to look at some of the different things, because there's a variety of different teachings that we offer, a lot of resources that can actually help you get to that next level wherever you are in your relationship. And this isn't us selling to you so much as it's us providing resources for you to, continue to grow at your own pace, your own speed. Raise the bar on your relationship. Go ahead and take a look at the Raise the Bar tab and look at the value that's there. Think about, if you're having difficulties, challenges, like the things that we're talking about, there's a training series that's there that you get to actually set the price that can actually help you, gain some tools and some resources and some teachings that are going to assist you in getting to that next level. So feel free to go ahead and take a look at that. But the third thing that we should really look at, you're going to say, like, they're always talking about communication. It's
Well,
true.
it's important.
It's
Yeah.
extremely important as communication styles.
Hmm. It's but see, this one is both, I think, nature and nurture.
I agree with that.
Excuse me, sorry about that. So, how we communicate with our partner, it's like innately I could say something, um and it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with how I was raised or whatever. Um it could be hurtful, or you know. So it doesn't necessarily, like I said, it goes both ways. It's not, oh well, that's how, I mean, I won't say that's not the case, because there are some people who we mimic how we grew up.
Mm.
You know, I heard my mom, and I'm just saying this because this didn't happen, but I heard my mom always call my dad a dummy or something like that. And I heard my dad always refer to my mom as, or the B word or whatever it is. And so you grow, you become very used to hearing that verbiage, and it doesn't. There's no shock value. There's no. You just, oh well, I'm just repeating what I heard. This is just how this person talked to this person, so I'm gonna do the same thing. And some of us, we pick that up.
Right. We have to stop being parrots.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when it comes to the nurture side of it, we're parrots. We're mimicking the things that we've seen modeled out for us, as opposed to being human beings, being adults, being true individuals, and paving our own way. And I agree with you that communication is both I guess, a product of both nature versus nurture. I'm a talker. I'm just naturally more talkative in a variety of different environments. You're much more introspective and reserved naturally. So you tend to sit back and be a little bit more, what's the word, introverted, as opposed
Mhm.
to being extroverted like I am. Now I
Mhm.
won't always jump out to the front. Sometimes I'll observe as well, but I think I'm just more naturally gifted in the arena of I'll go and talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere, if I'm called upon to do that. But when it comes to our the way that we communicate with each other as a couple, there's sometimes where you might be more naturally assertive or empathetic. You're much more empathetic than I am. It
Mhm.
comes to you. So you can actually connect and communicate and articulate feelings in a manner in which it doesn't necessarily show up as one of my strengths.
Mhm.
Right. And that's a natural piece for you. That's nature. But I know that if once you point it out to me and say, hey, you know what, she's not feeling a certain way, or maybe, and this shows up when we do our coaching with couples. Snooks will call something out, and I'm like, that's what that is. Not that I don't recognize emotions, but she'll call something out, and but then I'm able like, oh, okay, and then I can speak to something intelligently, from an emotional intelligently, from a logic standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint, because then I can draw a dotted line to our past experience or something that we've learned from the Gottman Institute, but maybe something I need to point it out. So then I'll drive into it, and then I can actually communicate that. That's the nurture side of it.
Mhm. So the other part about that is too. I mean, you can have two individuals that come together, and one individual grew up in a loving environment, and the other individual grew up in what we'll just call a cold type of environment, where they didn't receive words of affirmation or hugs or whatever it is. Um, and there's obviously there's a conflict because like, hold on, why is it that I'm always, or you're in, whatever it is, there's the disagreement, the disconnect. And the person that grew up in the certain type of environment is like, well, I didn't grow up like that, I didn't hear this, I didn't hear that. And the other person is like, well, I didn't grow up the way that you grew up, I grew up loving, I grew up being cherished, blah blah blah, or something that's just innately in me. So it is both. But the good thing about this is that you still, as an individual, can decide how you want to proceed. um because if you think about it, okay, so you didn't grow up hearing these type of words, or you grew up hearing a certain type of language. How did that make you feel? How did you respond to that? So you did not, if you did not like that, um then okay, so let's make some adjustments. Let's learn to uh do something different. Does that
And
make sense?
it does. And just by us saying that doesn't
Thank-
mean that it's easy.
oh no, it's what is that saying? It's simple but not easy, or something like that. It's, oh, just make the adjustment. That's a simple thing, make the adjustment, but that's not easy at all.
Yeah, most solutions are very simple. They're just not easily executed,
Mhm.
and it takes effort. And we'll always come back to the fact that relationships are work. It's the beautiful, most amazing work you will ever do, but it is work. And for anybody to tell you that it's not going to require some type of effort, some type of um, exertion, is a lie. Some things will
Mhm.
come natural, some things will come easy, but there's going to be some times where it comes to things like conflict resolution, where it's going to take work. And conflict resolutions happens to be the number 4 thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to nature versus nurture, because it also kind of sits on that fulcrum point of being one or the other. It can go either way. Conflict resolution can be either nature or nurture. And when we say conflict resolution, we're talking about doing it in a manner which is healthy and productive, right? Now, when we're talking about it, it means that people who grew up in homes where conflict was avoided, pushed off to the side, brushed under the rug, poorly managed, may struggle with conflict resolution in their adult stages of their relationship as well. Well, like, every time something comes up, oh, I'm going to avoid it. Oh, let me just kick it down. I can down the road. Whereas a person that actually grew up in a home that, something came up, they saw their parents not yelling, but sitting down and having discussions. Well, and they see them kind of negotiating, if you will, recognizing that when they come to the kitchen table to talk about their bills, and they come to the kitchen table to talk about some of the challenges that are taking place, maybe coming to the kitchen table talking about vacations they want to go on. There's this resolution that takes place where they see it's done in a healthy manner. Now, the nature part of it is, I don't care who you are. Once you met with some type of opposition, more times than not, you're immediately like, no, I want it done my way.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some maturity to be able to say, even though I want it done this way, let me listen to what this other person has to say. And then you start to find some resolution to where it meets both of your needs, the needs of the relationship, and not necessarily just my needs or just your needs. So there's a balance there of nature versus nurture. I'm sorry, I'm enduring that whole conversation piece.
Oh, you're good. And I was just thinking while you were talking though, um, even those people who've seen their parents argue, you know, I don't feel like just because you saw your parents argue, that means that there's something wrong. I think you see them get into it, that's natural because you're gonna have disagreements. I mean, not physical, not fighting, but like there have been times when I raised my voice and you raised your voice. We we made it a rule. We don't fight in front of the kids, but there have been situations where I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Blah blah blah, whatever. It might get a little heated, but then they see us resolve it. Also, because I don't ever want my kids or anyone to have this misguided thought that you will never have conflict. Oh, my parents didn't argue. Even not just, well, all they did was sit down at the table and um I think that's a farce. That's just me personally, and maybe because I'm speaking from, I know, my own emotional self. There's going to be some riled up feelings or whatever, but just to be able to see that we could have a disagreement and sometimes it gets heated and be able to work it out, and we're still, the next day we're still loving, and we're, oh, we got past that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and also, let's be careful too when we talk about conflict resolution. Every time there's conflict doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sound
There's a resolution for it.
well, hey, there's a resolution for it, but I was going to say just because it appears to be conflict, it might be different. Like conflict to us might be very different than what's perceived as
Yeah.
conflict somewhere else
Exactly.
in another household.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's couples that we've worked with in the past where, based on the way that they were raised, that it's absolutely natural for voices to get raised
Mm-hmm.
and the meter of speech to pick up, and we're going to talk, and to them that's like, wait, there's no conflict, this is just how we talk.
That's true.
But somebody that grew up in a much more subdued, reserved household,
You're like, wait, what's happening right now?
for real,
What's going on?
folks, we can't say how many times over the years, all the couples that we've worked with, where it was just getting used to that, recognizing and reconciling that somebody's like, okay, something's going on, and like you're getting nervous, all of a sudden all of your triggers are being hit, and it's just the way these other folks just operate. And it takes time for you to recognize, like, oh, okay, they're not about to kill each other. They're not. They're not. That's their volume. That is like that. Okay, my 10 is their 3, and you get used to it over time, or you recognize that. Okay, I don't have to have my guard up, and even be able to resolve that. To recognize that. Okay, it's just different, not better, not worse, just different. So not calling everything a conflict that's not necessarily a conflict, right? we have to be able to recognize that when there's, a point A, point B, and we don't agree, and now we need to make a decision, that's conflict. And we need to actually, find a way to resolve that. How do we find a solution to actually meet the needs of everybody involved? But then when it's just like, oh, my volume is different than your volume, and the meter of my speech is different than the meter of your speech, that might not be conflict. That just might be, we've got to find a way to where we can actually find middle ground to where we can communicate each other and nothing's lost in translation.
Yeah.
So let's look at that. So, but honestly, it is nature versus nature. It could be one or the other or both, right?
Sorry.
No worries. And the last thing, the fifth point, I don't think no matter where you go, people are, she's trying to give it back to me, y'all. Look, I'm giving gifts. I think I got sick, first from Isaiah, and I gave it to her. Yeah. And now she wants to give it back. See, on Valentine's Day, might be the only gift we give each other. Got me laughing. Look, the last thing, and I think it's probably the one that underlines everything, is values and beliefs. Our values and beliefs about relationships, right? These are the things that we carry into our marriages, right? It's the things that we bring from our past, from our last relationship, and the one before that, and the one before that, and the one before that, and what we saw as youth, are shaped by both nature and nurture.
Yeah, excuse me. So yeah, I feel like that too. Because a lot of our values, and well, they shape us, like you said, and it comes from what we saw growing up. But I say it comes from what we saw growing up, but a lot of times the things that we saw we didn't necessarily believe in. So that's why it could be nature versus nurture,
Ooh, I could tell some stories. I saw some stuff that I definitely do not believe in. And I'm not going to say anything out of respect for my elders, but no, but you're right. There's things that we saw, but I will also say that there might be things that we witnessed that, like, okay, so the last podcast, you talked about 3 tips to be a better wife. And one of the things that you
better
mentioned,
spouse, but okay.
Well, it was a better wife because I did better husband beforehand.
I know.
But no, one of the things you talked about was independence, right? So while, and depending upon whether or not values and beliefs, if you grew up in a more conservative or traditional way of relationships, the man does this, the woman does that,
gender roles and stuff.
Yeah, just gender roles, all of that. If there was a relationship or an environment in which somebody grew up in there, independence was very much a mainstay. It was like, a pillar of that home. And then somebody steps in and they're like, "Oh, your independence, that makes me feel some kind of way. Like you're pushing me off." That can cause a challenge, and some of it is nature. Like this is just always the way I am. Like I'll tell you right now, Isaiah, nature versus nurture. He's 3 years old. That's an independent little boy. He wants things done his way, and that's like the only way. And so there's a lot of nature there. We're learning how to nurture that in a manner in which, it's not going to overrun or cause everybody else a bunch of strife. But I don't want to dampen that.
I'm ready to put him out.
but that's nature. I can see it there. Whereas you're trying to teach somebody to be independent, and that's more nurture. Like, okay, this person's too dependent. I need to help them learn how to do things on their own. And then as you start to create opportunities for them to become more independent, what have you, that's more nurture. But that comes down to the values and beliefs of the different homes that you grow up in, the communities in which you were raised.
That's funny. I thought you were going to talk about, I felt it was kind of going towards back to when we first got married.
Oh, we can take it there.
No, I was like, okay. Just how the differences, like you said, well, I mean, one thing you talk about gender roles and that kind of thing. I was different. I don't know from what you expected it to be,
You were different. I just had this idea that, and which is funny because my mother was extremely
I was
independent.
just thinking about that too, which is really odd, but okay.
My mother is as independent, she was, God bless her, was as independent as they come, because she was forced into that role to be an independent woman. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 2 years old.
2.
And here we are. So that was like 52 years ago, almost 53 years ago. And even with growing up in that environment where she was that strong woman, where we got together, I had this thing in my head where it was like, I'm going to be the man, let me lead, whether it was leading in my household or leading on the dance floor. I was like, let me lead when we sitting there
Oh
dancing
my
together.
gosh, she used to always complain, "Can I lead now?" I'm like, "I'm just dancing.
Like, I want to groove this
I'm
way.
just
She pushed me that way.
regular."
And I was like, okay. And we're still working on it, folks. We got lessons coming up at the Arthur Murray School of Dancing.
Whatever.
And I tip them all the time. Make sure you emphasize that I'm supposed to lead.
Oh, brother, ever.
No, but it is. It's part of the way that you deal with these challenges and your conflicts when it comes to relationship. But it all stems from everything we've talked about thus far. It's all about your values and beliefs. It's your values. How my voice is heard. It's your values when it comes down to how we're going to resolve conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an element of nature versus nurture in some of these things. Some things are just nature. Doesn't make it, set in stone. Some things are nurture. It was learned, but learned over a long period. Does not make it set in stone. We can change things when the reward is worth it. And I think we're both here to tell you, and I hope you agree, that your relationship, your marriage, is always going to be worth it. If it's enriching, if it's rewarding, if it's something that you took vows for in the eyes and the presence of God, and it's worth working for, and there's no abuse involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about, whenever we talk about salvaging relationships, if it's something where a person is not physically, mentally, financially, emotionally, any way you can think of abuse, we don't condone that in any way.
Mm-hmm.
We tell you to seek coaching, seek counseling, to work your way through that. And if there is truly something where you're endangered, you need to move on for your safety. But if there's something where it's just, we need to work through some emotional things, we need to work through some nature versus nurture, we need to work through some stuff that I brought into this relationship or that my spouse brought into this relationship, work through those things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But know that we can learn new tricks. We can always grow, just like your cells in your body are always replenishing. We can replenish the ways in which we've learned, and we can unlearn some things so that way we can have a beautiful, fruitful relationship.
Yeah.
So that's our Valentine's Day message. We hope you had a wonderful Valentine's Day, because this will air the day after Valentine's Day. We love you guys. We hope you have an amazing marriage, and please remember to stay married into crazy. And remember, sometimes it's just crazy, but what we're talking about is
Compassion, real, accountable, zealous, and yielding.
so until the next time,
Be blessed.
bye.
Bye bye.